segmenting annual fund appeals for pipeline growth. Go ahead and move to the next slide. Great. Now let's start by looking at a couple of examples of just basic donor pyramid. I'm sure if you've been in development for a while now, you've probably seen some version of this as far as how you think about each classification of donor by giving size and giving type. There are some variations of this, but generally the model looks similar to this, where your smaller, more infrequent, kind of lower level donors are kind of at the base of the pyramid. And then as you go up, the number of donors decreases and the amount that each donor gives increases. It's a pretty commonly held theory. I mean, we can see we pulled this directly from HubSpot. Go to the next slide, please. So we're thinking about segmentation specifically of whether we segment by generation or by giving size or however we want to break up our donor base. We want to kind of rethink that model in these types of scenarios. So while the distributions of smaller donors at the bottom of the pyramid, larger donors at the top is something that is mathematically accurate, the problem with that is that we tend to spend too much time focusing on kind of that bottom rung of donors rather than focusing on the top part, that major givers category. And like we were talking about, even kind of the mid-tier givers category, because we know we'll get 80 to 95% of our campaign totals from that top tier group. Go to the next slide, please. So we'll see a model of this kind of pyramid that we like to use and how we segment our donor base when we're thinking about donor retention, because we all want to grow our donor pipeline, and the donor retention has two components to it. It's both acquiring new donors, but more importantly, it's retaining the ones that we already have. So this is almost an inverse pyramid that we want to think about when segmenting our donor base. So our biggest part of the funnel will be engagement, which is just getting in front of people and letting them know about the problem and how you and your organization fit into solving that problem. This is donors learning about us. The next step would be the opposite, which would be us learning about them, us learning about the donors rather than the inverse. So there's lots of ways to get information about potential supporters. There's prospect research, just the old school way. There's analytics, and there's our personal favorite, which is peer information. You'll never get more accurate information about someone than from their friends. But we are wanting to learn about our constituency and be very, very educated on each of these rungs rather than kind of going in blind. Next would be to assign out as far as who would be the best person to talk to them and when they should talk to them, and it would be to solicit, painting a picture of what problems your nonprofit solves, as well as to draw the line, how it supports their values. And then, like I said, the most important part would be retention. So the average donor retention rate for nonprofits nationally in 2023, I think was somewhere between, I think it was like between 40 and 45%, somewhere in there. So less than half of those who give to a nonprofit will give to the same nonprofit again. And we know how much easier and less expensive and labor intensive it is to keep our existing donors than it is to find new ones, even though both components are important. And after that, it would be to rinse and repeat. So the engagement process is also becomes far, far easier after they've already given to your organization. They already know a little bit about you. It's a lot easier to kind of keep them retained. Next slide, please. Great. So we think about segmenting our donor base, kind of starting off kind of a high level. There's a million different ways that we could segment. The criteria we could use for this could be infinite, but there's three that tend to be pretty universal across most nonprofits. Not all, but definitely most. These are kind of applied no matter what your donor demographics look like. Sorry about that, technical difficulties. So the first would be their prior giving history. So how much they've given in the past. Do they give annually? Do they give monthly? Do they only give at events? Are they currently paying on a pledge? Like, what is the amount of money that they've given to you, to your organization, total over the course of their life? The next would be the affinity for the mission. So how close are they to the organization overall? Are they a board member, a past board member, former staff, a parent, or a family member of someone who's been served? Or another really important one, are they a lapsed donor? Maybe they gave to your organization, up until the pandemic started, but then their interest shifted as the financial markets shifted. So you can kind of tailor your communication to each of these specific groups because all of these situations are different. And then the investment area. So how did they first get connected with the organization? Did they attend an event and give you some money at that? Were they a friend of one of your donors? Did they donate to you online? So what area did they invest in, and how did they get connected to you in the first place? And then what is your relationship with them now, if any? How far along has that relationship progressed? And so you can kind of put them and categorize them kind of based on these kind of three kind of high level criteria. Next slide, please. Now, segmentation can seem like a lot of work. Trying to figure out, where to segment your donor base and why. So here are some of the main reasons to segment, and we'll get into some of the specifics here in a second. But high level, here are some of the benefits of segmentation. First off, the more personalized something feels, the higher the response rate. It's why retail brands will put your name in the email subject line or the preview text. It's a little thing, but it really does scientifically improve open rates. My college, for example, does this so poorly, it makes me crazy. I'll get texts and emails asking me to donate. It'll say like, "Dear graduate," or "Dear valued alumni." And I'm like, oh, you guys are making me feel so warm and fuzzy. They don't even attempt to personalize it. So we segment to be able to increase our response rate and be as personal as possible, because someone can read this and think, okay, this clearly applies to me specifically. This will increase our returns for appeals, not only because more people will reply, but the amounts you get will typically be a little bit higher as well if someone thinks this was clearly sent to me. Another thing to keep in mind is that if they don't reply to that particular appeal, if we segment and personalize properly, even if we make $0 off that donor that time, that's still a valuable personalized touch point, either for retaining a past donor or cultivating a new one. So it gives you something to draw on, to build on, that hopefully makes you stand out from some of the other charities in town with kind of these super generic, boring, unpersonalized appeals. And then one of the things that we'll kind of dive into here in a moment is you have really good data about each of these donor segments. It allows you to improve and just constantly refine your communication style, your language, as far as what works, and even more importantly, what doesn't work. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jenna to talk us through some of the aspects of personalization when segmenting out our donor base.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jared. I promise I do know your actual name. And to make it up to you, I will only refer to Jake as Jim for the rest of today's forum. Okay. Everybody gets it. So I threw a question in the chat. I'd love to hear from you guys. You can respond in the chat or raise your hands if you want to share some insight about your organization. How often do you, as the philanthropic leader or others in your leadership at your organization, have one-on-one visits with your top volunteers, with your board members? How often are you asking them their why? Okay, think about that and think about the ways that that information can further help us segment and personalize even at a very mass level. As Jared pointed out, if we were to flip that donor pyramid on its head and really think about, instead of making our donors like do all the work and climb to the top of that hill, right, to become our major donors, our most lauded, loved donors, if we turn it upside down as a funnel, I think that really sort of helps us visually put the work on ourselves, right? We are the ones responsible for deepening the relationship, deepening the engagement. When we talk about annual funds, when we talk about our mass appeals, obviously we cannot devote as much time to a mailer to 1,000 constituents as we devote to our one-on-ones with our signature gift donors, right? We can, however, find some simple solutions within even a basic database. Like Jared pointed out, all we need is some basic data to make that mail appeal just a little bit more custom and personal. If we know their past giving and we can personalize the ask in that appeal, that's a simple merge field. We can make it seem like we are specifically talking to that donor about their giving history. Things like "Dear friend of BCA" versus "Dear Sam and Jenna." That means you know me at least a little bit, right? That means you actually want to address me, not just the new person that might send you a check. Enhancing the likelihood of engagement or contribution. I think Jared already pointed out, like, we're not just trying to get money when we send a mass appeal or a mass communication to our donors. We want their engagement. We want their time. We want them to look over our appeal. We want them to understand what our organization is working toward. Anything that you can do to enhance the time they're going to put their eyeballs on your organization's pieces, that is enhancing and deepening the relationship, and it is giving you a deeper opportunity to connect with those donors. So, what other benefits do we have of personalization? Recapturing your lapsed donors. Again, as Jared pointed out, you're gonna save money by retaining the donors you had last year. It's gonna be easier to recapture them, and the sooner you recapture, so for anybody that's like, what are these alphabet soup letters? LYBUNT traditionally means last year, but unfortunately not this year. SYBUNT is some year, but unfortunately not this year. These are just kind of broad categories that we might use to break down our database of former donors. When you're looking at last year's donors, you've got to recoup that ask, make that ask again, and get them to renew as soon as possible. It's one of the reasons that we strongly encourage our clients to consider multi-year asks, even at the lowest gift level. Getting someone to lock into a multi-year pledge lightens your load, lightens their load, and it means less work on both parties' parts, right? Set it and forget it. As long as you keep them engaged in the process, they're going to continue to support your organization and the good work you're doing. Let's go on to the next slide and dig in a little bit more on some samples. These are some simple differences. On the left, you're going to see what I would call kind of an ugly Betty mailing, right? So this probably arrived in one of those standard like A4 envelopes. It might have even had the little cutout window where the address is like on the letter itself. This looks like a bill, you guys. That's not a piece of mail I'm going to get excited to open. It is probably going to make me think, oh crap, I forgot to pay a bill, right? On the right hand, you've got a beautiful custom piece from Effingham. This sample has a million merge fields worked in there. Not really, but there are a few. They, of course, are merging in your personal name. There's a spot in here somewhere I saw where they are specifically asking for a higher amount. And they're saying like a gift of 250 plus qualifies you for recognition in the blah, blah society, right? That is an amazing way to appeal to a renewed donor and to slightly increase their giving year over year. The beautiful photos, the happy smiling people, and the testimonials, those are all things that we can do to really deepen the impact of what's otherwise a pretty simple mailing, right? It gets donors' attention and it's going to stand out more. It's going to be much more likely that they read that cover to cover. Let's go to the next slide. All right, we're going to talk about maximizing your returns. When I touched on this just a little bit, so a simple merge field that all of us should be able to pull. It doesn't matter if you're in like the Cadillac of Razor's Edge, if you're working from a simple spreadsheet that Pride Philanthropy helped you set up. You should be able to pull the donor's last gift amount or the total of their last fiscal year giving. Think about, instead of like your generic pledge form that says, you know, will you make a contribution of $1,500, $250? Think about customizing the ask, even in a mass appeal. Again, it is a simple mail merge from a very basic data spreadsheet. And you can turn what's like a generic, will you support our organization, into thank you for your 2023 gifts totaling $850. A gift of $1,000 will qualify you for the Angels Circle. Please consider making your gift today. It's simple. It is much more direct. And again, you're upselling the people that are already committed to your organization. And they've demonstrated that through past giving and consistent communications with the organization. All right, let's go to the next sample. This is, again, a sample where right here in the second paragraph, you'll see where they say, last year you gave X amount. We would be grateful if you would consider increasing your gift this year to X amount to ensure the home will always be here. It is a simple merge. We can talk you through it in Microsoft. And this makes a huge difference in the personalization and the way that you are communicating with your donors, even at a mass mail appeal. Let's move on to the next slide. A great benefit of segmentation is the retention and relationship building. Again, you cannot spend, even if you're in a huge shop, even if you have a dedicated annual gift director, an annual gift team, you cannot give all of your annual gift level donors the same kind of time that we typically want to allocate to our signature and mid-level gifts, right? But if we do not start now, building intentional and meaningful long-term relationships with our entry-level and mid-level donors, we will never, ever see them move up the pipeline to become our next batch of major donors, right? We've got to invest in them so that they will continue to invest and deepen their engagement with our organization. So by segmenting your specific donor communications, you have a great opportunity to nurture that relationship. Sending a mail appeal that is one size fits all to every single name and address in your database is certainly one way to approach your annual fund. But if you are taking the time to customize, to personalize your mail appeals, and then to sort your donors at that giving level into a few different buckets, I promise you will see bigger returns. Speaking to your donors' unique interests, as Jared said, where did they invest? If they only ever give to your one annual gala, that is probably their passion point. Maybe they like being seen at that gala. Maybe you need to target them to increase and become a title sponsor at that gala. Getting them to roll over into your endowment fund is probably not going to be the thing that excites and entices them at this stage in their relationship with your organization. You've got to be genuine. You've got to use authentic language that reflects their connection or interest with your organization. As Jared pointed out, higher ed is already doing this. They know everything about you. I promise. It's in their database. They know what clubs you participated in. They know what sports you played. They know what you studied. And if they are not using that personal data to directly appeal to you and your interests and seek your funding, frankly, Jared, they don't deserve your gift. They need to be paying more attention to who you were when you were on their campus, right? That same principle can be applied to all of our organizations and all of the donor relationships that we are building. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, this is a tiny little peek at how very crazy and type A Jenna can be. This is an appeal that I put together during my time in higher ed when I was chiefly responsible for our annual fund. It is crazy, right? We went way over the top, but it is a really fun example of going cover to cover and as personalized as possible. So we were in higher ed. Obviously, I knew all the things that my alumni base was interested in. And we were in a place where we really, really needed to capture new donors. I needed to find those donors that already had an affinity for my organization. And so we started with the cover. I named you by name. I gave you the welcome sign from the campus, right? I wanted it to feel like you were coming back to your alma mater. As you opened up that piece, every one of our segments had a custom photo representing the group that we were trying to appeal for you to fundraise for. And we used very specific language that came directly from the traditions and culture of those different organizations. This was a very broad effort across our entire department to increase alumni participation and to grow our number of entry-level donors, especially our young alumni, that many of them were still in graduate school or like building their early careers. So we knew they couldn't give a lot of money. We likened it to, skipping a Starbucks once a month and contributing $10 to your alma mater. From the letter, from the signature to may the Lord bless you and keep you. That is like a very traditional greeting from the Centenary College Choir. It is something that they use all the time, and it is how they start many of their performances. We worked with members of each of these committees and affinity groups to really speak very personally to each of these groups. The last thing I'll point out about my crazy is that over on the right-hand column, there was a little line there that says, may I join a different giving network? Of course you may. And we went so far as to plug in other affinities that these alumni had participated in. We had a hierarchy, and we were like, okay, this is the one that is the most indoctrinated in our alumni. Let's prioritize that. If they're also in a Greek org, let's go down the row. This was an incredibly successful appeal. Again, I know those of you that are like a one-person shop, you're looking at me like I am nuts, and I am. This was extra. But it is an example of where you can take your appeals with ultimately a very simple merge field. The specific language was used, the signature from a member of that community was used. Everything was about making this the most personal appeal possible. Even if they did not give, which many people did, we increased by about 20% alumni giving the year that we launched this effort. Even if they did not give, we got feedback that this was one of their most favorite mail appeals ever from the university because it really looked like it was personal for them. All right, let's go to the next slide. We'll hide my crazy a little bit. Let's talk about data-driven decision-making. So if you're going to take the time to customize your mail appeals, even if you do this once a year, you need to then use the data that you capture from that appeal to make the rest of your work stronger, okay? Regularly analyzing your donor response patterns is going to give you great insight into how you can further refine and segment your appeal strategy. Looking at, identifying your donors, looking at that data, looking at who gives to your campaign every single year because you sent them a custom letter, looking at their increase amount, right? If they're giving to your organization $100, $200 just because you sent them a letter in the mail, just in response to an email appeal, those are people that are likely worth a little bit of extra time and direct communication. Again, I'm not saying put your CEO or your executive director in front of them, but give them a phone call. Thank them for contributing to every mail appeal over the last 3 years. You have that data in your system as long as you're logging your gifts, and letting them know that you see their contributions, even at that low level, is a really great way to capture a new committed donor that's going to stay with you for the long haul. It also helps to ensure ongoing relevance. So again, you want to increase the effectiveness of every one of your mail appeals. Otherwise, we're wasting time, we're wasting paper, we're wasting incredible amounts of postage and print costs, and we're just sending out these blanket appeals that may or may not even get returned. One of my favorite kind of online thinkers in higher ed and fundraising is Jim Langley. And he recently posted about annual fund. The money raised in any year is highly dependent on the relationships built in previous years. We know this, and we talk about it a lot at the major gift level. Those are relationships that take years and years to cultivate. To get someone to name a building, right? They don't do that because like they just got a letter in the mail. But if we start now and we think about growing our own pipeline of future major gift prospects and spend just a little bit of time making your mail appeals, your email appeals more personal and more meaningful, I promise you will see an increase in mid-level donors and meaningful engagement with your organization. Jake, why don't you take it away and tell us a little bit more about
the real Jake is ready to take it home. So how we like to always wrap these up is with things that are a little bit actionable, things that you can actually try. So we kind of go from the most global of data to the theory, and then we close with you can try this at home type stuff. So that's what we're going to walk away with today. We have a few slides that kind of dig in on a few things that we know work that you can put into practice and see if it works for you as well. So just looking first at giving patterns and engagement to assess how you segment. Now, when we say segmentation, this word gets thrown around a lot in Annual Appeal. What we kind of mean is prioritization to some level. Like, yes, instead of sending out one massive annual year-end letter to our entire donor base or our entire mailing list or multiple mailing lists or whatever, and it's all the same and it just says, dear valued customer or whatever. We do want to put it in different buckets. But as Jenna mentioned a few different times, it also is about being specific about which donors and which segments of donors get a little special attention. And we do that based on likelihood of them giving a gift. We kind of double down on our ones that are the easier yeses. Instead of saying, well, we got these who haven't had any cultivation at all, so we're going to spend more money on that. It's like, we actually want to do the opposite of that. People who are already closer and already giving and giving more consistently, those are the people that we want to retarget, because in terms of ROI, that's where we'll hit stuff. Now, we'll still, have a meaningful touch point if we can with everybody, but usually we are at a critical mass with our fundraising department. We can only do so much in terms of our time, in terms of our budget that we have access to, in terms of our ad spend, our bandwidth that we can spend on social media versus email versus all the other things that we're being asked to do. So we really focus on the ones that are going to be the easiest conversions first and set special priority. And here's one of the ways that we do that. So looking at historical giving patterns is probably the number one and easiest way to determine which your easiest bucket, your smallest and easiest bucket. So kind of looking at their past donations is obviously a first thing that we want to do, is how much have they given in the past, but there's also other data that's in there about how much have they just interfaced with our organization, how long have they been on our mailing list. These are all easy things that you should be able to in some way look up in your database or figure out by going back at the historical records. The easiest and biggest one is that donors who have increased their gift kind of on their own, like maybe they've gotten a little more wealth accumulation over the years, they started giving in their 30s or maybe when they were 12, depending on what year they were born, and they've just kind of inched up that gift as they're going. Us continuing to send that same appeal every year is not optimizing what we can do with that donor. We kind of increase the relationship building aspect as we do that. So we look at their increased contributions over the year, saying, yes, I'm willing to give more if I feel like I have a reason to. So we really want to have a small segment in this case of highly targeted, highly personalized. So not necessarily optimizing everybody for the people who have this behavior, but like taking a very small slice of the pie and saying, okay, we're going to do a fantastic job of targeting every single person who's given us something 5 years in a row. If they've given the last 5 years and they haven't heard from us because our donor base is too big or whatever, they've multiple mail appeals, say their cumulative lifetime giving is still like under $500. Still, if they've given consistently 5 years in a row, that's an easy slice to cut out. So that's an easy query to run in your database usually, or you can just look at cumulative giving and see when they started and stopped. There's lots of ways to sort for that. But consistency and consistency increases is number one, easiest. If you do nothing else, just try that one. The second thing, slightly less important than giving, but I would argue pretty close to the top, is just engagement. As I mentioned, just interfacing of some kind, just responsiveness to communication. We have tools nowadays where we can see who opens our emails. Like if I send you an email, I can see when you opened it, what time, what you were doing, where you clicked on that email, like the heat maps of where everyone's clicked. All these things are available to us. So if you see someone who's regularly interfacing with the stuff that you send, they are very likely someone who is interested in you as well. So we want to target those and say, hey, I want everybody who has opened every email in the last 6 months to get a very specific appeal. Maybe it's an email appeal because also they're indicating that, hey, I'm down to communicate via email. I check my email. I read all of your e-newsletters or whatever it might be. But that's a very, very easy segmentation. You can do it electronically and usually for zero cost as well. All right. Section number 2, matching gifts. Donors who have in some way taken advantage of a matching program. If you're not familiar with this, usually a signature donor will come forward or will go to a signature donor, a major gifts donor, and say, hey, I know you're going to give $25,000 or $50,000. Can we use this as like a challenge gift or a matching gift so that we can say between now and November 15th, your gift is doubled. We've got a donor who's going to match you dollar for dollar. There's lots of different ways to do this. That's not the only example. It's just one of the more common ones. If you see people who tend to step up during those specific stretches, and one of the ways that we always say to optimize those stretches is to have a thing that you're funding. It's like, yes, we're going to try to double our the donation between now and November 15th, but it is in order to do X. We have a specific outcome that money will be spent on so that we can have this status quo now and then this new future after we've gotten this doubly grossed gift. So if you have someone who tends to respond to those, they are showing you that impact means more to them than anything. So I like to give when my dollar goes the furthest. So then we can segment those people and say, hey, you know, when we did a matching fund last fall, we did a matching gift. Here are the 37 donors who gave to that and got us dollar for dollar up to another 50,000 or 10,000, whatever the amount was. We're going to retarget those exact 37 again, and we're going to have highly specific language about impact because they've shown us that that's the thing that matters most to them. It's not recognition. They know that the matching donor themselves is going to get the bigger recognition. They don't care as much about putting their name on a thing. They do care highly about impact. So we're going to tailor our appeal to impact just to that group. And we're going to send it just to those 37 and then it's done. And maybe we do that every year, but we can segment it pretty small by just looking at the psychology, behavior patterns of people and saying, what makes them tick? What are the most important things to them? We're going to send it right back to them. It's the same reason that you ask your donors, you know, what type of projects they want to support. And then you use that data to figure out what project your campaign is going to be. They're like, oh my gosh, you said that we were going to do this project, right? That's the exact one that I wanted. We're like, weird coincidence. It's crazy. It's just because we're collecting data and sending it right back to them. And lastly, just capitalizing on this kind of motivation and this intrinsic, I need to have impact, I need to see my dollar go further, will lead to increased giving for them, not just in the one appeal that you're sending, but just kind of overall. It just kind of gets them more into the fold, maybe gets them a chance to upgrade and become more engaged with your organization. All right, last and not least, making personal connections. Donors with established personal connections to the organization. And this could be a whole bunch of things. They could be a volunteer or a board member, or they interface somehow with the frontline staff, or they're not just giving, and that's the main way that they connect to the organization, but they come in person to events, whether those are fundraising events or just other events that you have. If you have something like a food bank, they volunteer their time to serve food or put goods into boxes and ship them out. All these things, people who give of their time, you can almost guarantee that that's a double down on how engaged they want to be and how excited they are. If they are regularly interfacing with you, not just through gifts, but through connecting to your organization directly, that's its own segment on its own. We should have a very specific appeal, even if that number is small, even if it's 12 people. Great, we're going to do 12 personalized letters or 12 personalized phone calls with follow-up letters or whatever it might be. And we're going to have a lot of impact on how you can get involved, how your gift can go further, et cetera, et cetera. The most important aspect of any event, as we know, like we're not obviously preaching to do as few fundraising events as possible because it takes time away from major gifts, but there's a place for it in mature programs. And if you have a well-performing event that you just want to keep going because it's important to your donor base or the board or your visibility, there's reasons to keep them around. But the one thing is you just have to do a great job with the follow-up, collecting all the contact data and all the contact information from everyone who attends, what they give that night, and then personalized follow-ups or even a segmented follow-up. If you don't have time to personally call 300 people, to have some kind of a segmented follow-up with some specific action items tied to that. As Jenna mentioned, if all they do is go to that one event and that's what they're most excited about, we're going to double down on that and ask them to be a bigger part of it next year, or to be a gold sponsor, or if they own a distillery to provide all the alcohol, or if they own a DJ business to do the music, or whatever it might be. But there's ways to segment it down. We just have to look at how do they already interface with us? How are they already excited about us? And then we provide opportunity for them to do that further or do that more. It's the easiest way to do it. They will show you through their behavior what they want. We just have to listen and splice up the lists in order for what that to be, and then customize those and send them out. It's a little bit more work, but you're looking at like 5x, 10x return on being able to spend a little bit of time on this. A couple last points is just to leverage a new prospect's event attendance by asking for their feedback. People love to give their opinion. If you can't get them to respond to you saying, hey, can you just give us a quick rate? Like, tell us about the food, the drink, the venue, just give us some information on this. Just get them talking. Something where they're going to say, oh yeah, I'd like to share. I had this really annoying thing. The hors d'oeuvres were very dry. I didn't like them, or whatever weird thing they complain about. But just getting them to respond in some way is a huge, huge deal for just starting that relationship and getting the interfacing. And then the last thing is just any way you can, getting them talking so you can intentionally listen to their wants and needs and then provide those things right back to them. So this is obviously a lot of different things you can try. You don't have to try all of those things. I just wanted to give you a bunch of different creative ways that you could think through and start thinking about your own segmenting of your different annual appeals, your events, your follow-ups, and hopefully you found a nugget in there that you think, oh, I think we can actually try that this spring with our appeal and see if we can segment it this way. So with that, I will go to the last slide here and just open it up to any questions in our last couple of minutes here.